Welcome Algebra 2. Today we are going to go over finally a combination of translations and reflections. Now, this is going to be a little more challenging because we're doing both at the same time, but it's always important to keep in mind, this is what we went over in class, is we always first thing that we want to do, I'll put it on the side here, is first thing we want to do is the reflections first. Okay, I'm sorry I wasn't able to spell that as nice as I wanted to. And then the translations. It's kind of tough with this. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's start off. Well, the first thing we always want to do is, what is the parent function? Our parent function is the absolute value. It might be helpful to always just draw maybe like a little quick sketch of how it looks like. I always like to do that. And these problems and the other problems, I gave you the parent function, and these problems now I'm kind of taking that away from you, and I'm asking you to basically now try to do it on your own. Well, we draw a quick sketch. If you notice, it looks like it was first reflected over the x-axis, so something like that, and then it was shifted to the right, and then it went up. So it looks like what happened, one more time, is that this parent function, the red line, gets reflected over the x-axis, and then we basically just move it to the right by 2. Sorry, that was my phone. And then we just go up 1. All right? So I'll just keep that there as kind of a reference. Our parent function is the red line. This blue, this kind of brown line is now my reflection. So I want to do the reflection first, so I'll do it up here. If it's a reflection over the x-axis, remember, look back on our previous video or your notes that we're putting the negative, we're multiplying the outputs by -1. So our reflection equation is negative the absolute value of x. This is really just -1 times the absolute value of x, but we don't usually put the negative there just because we're lazy, and we just like to just make it nice and convenient, like y equals negative absolute value of x. Now the next thing to do is, well, did it move to the left, to the right, or up or down? Well, it moved to the right by 2, and then it went up by 1. So what I'm going to do now is create that equation. You should try doing this first without my help, and then see if you get it. And see if you use the previous videos to help you out, because I put the notes up there for you. So here we go. We're moving to the right. So we're moving to the right by 2. So it's going to be -2. Okay. So if you move to the right, it's a minus. If you move to the left, it's a positive. So here we put -2. And then we went up by 1. And so then we do +1. And that's it. That's my equation. I did my reflection equation first, and then finally I did my translations. Okay, so that's the equation there. Let's go down to this one here. So this one here is a square root function. So we're going to do the square root of x. Okay, I'm going to do a quick sketch of my graph. It looks something like this. Something like that. So if you notice, what looks like happened is it looks like it got reflected over the x-axis. Sorry, it got reflected over the y-axis. If you notice here, this line here is our y. So it looks like what happened is it got reflected, this red line, which is our parent function, gets reflected over the y-axis, and then it basically moves to the right by 2, and then it goes up by 1. So let's go ahead first and write down our reflected equation. So we're going to get y equals, if it's a reflection over the y-axis, our inputs are being multiplied by -1, so we put that there. Okay, now we just want to do our translation equation. So we're going to get y equals, all right, so here's our reflected equation. This moved over to the right by 2, and then it went up by 1. So if we move to the right by 2, okay, so I'm going to put this, I'm going to put my parentheses, negative, it tells us we're reflecting over the y-axis, and then it's going to be x minus 2. This is telling us that we moved to the right. It's a minus inside, and then we went up by 1, so it's just +1. There you go. And this is our equation for this black line now. the reflection, this -1 is multiplying our inputs by a negative number. So that tells us it's a reflection over the y-axis, which we have right here, from the parent function, which is the red line. Then we just move to the right by 2 and then up 1. And that's where I got my equation. Reflection, move to the right by 2 and then up 1. All right? So why don't you try doing these bottom 2 equations here and see what you get. All right? Well, let's look at this first one here. This first one here, this is just y equals x squared. This is our parent function. It kind of looks something like that. I don't know. I'm just going to do a quick... Oh, that kind of looked kind of bad. All right, it looks something like this. Okay. Well, if you notice, it looks like it got reflected over the x-axis. Something like that. So it looks like it got reflected over the x-axis. And then reflected over, and then it moved to the left by 1, and then it went down by 1. So it's kind of hard to draw this here without it kind of messing you up, but it looks like it's reflected over the x-axis. It was down 1 and left 1. All right, so if it's a reflection over the x-axis, I'll put it up here. The negative goes on the outside. Now we move to the left by 1 and down 1. So we move to the left, inside our parentheses, it's going to be plus 1 squared, and then we went down by 1, so it's going to be minus 1. And there we have it. This is now our equation for this right here. All right, let's go over to this last one over here, to this, the one that we have right here. Now if you look here, was this our parent function again is y equals x squared. I'm going to draw a quick sketch of that, which is here. So if you notice here, does it look like it got reflected? Of course, it didn't. And this problem here, it didn't even get reflected. All it did was got translated. So here, we're not even going to need to do any reflections. All it is that it got translated to the left by 2 and then down 1. So in this one here, this is just going to be y equals. It went to the left, so we're going to do x plus 2 inside our inputs, squared. And then it's down by 1, so minus 1. So in this case here, we didn't do any reflections, and that's okay. This is just very similar to the translations one that we did. But for the ones over here, they definitely involved a translation reflection. Here we had a reflection over the y-axis, and then we did our translations, and then this one up here was a reflection over the x-axis, and then we did our translation. So hopefully that helps you to kind of put these together. All right, so why don't you try doing these bottom 2 and see what you get. I'm going to go ahead and write the equations down below for the answers, and hopefully you were able to get the same equation. Okay, it's a reflection over the x-axis from our parent function. It moved over to the right by 2 and down by 4, so right by 2 is minus 2, and then down 4. We put the minus sign on the outside. This is the equation here. Okay, this one here, my parent function is y equals the square root of x. Okay, so it's something like this right here. It really looks like it got reflected. So it looks like it got reflected over the y-axis. And then it looks like it got reflected over the x-axis. So if this is our parent function right here, looks like we got the parent function got reflected over the y-axis. Then it got reflected over the x-axis. And then once it got reflected over both, it moved to the right by 3 and then up 1, 2, 3. So it went to the it went to the right by 3 and then it went up by 2. All right? So I'll break that up into 2 steps. So over here we're going to get y equals a reflection over the y-axis it's telling us that we're changing our inputs. Then it's a reflection over the x-axis, so I'll put the negative on the outside. Okay, so now I'm going to get negative square root. We're going to have negative. We're moving over to the right by 3, so x minus 3. We close our parentheses, and then we moved up by 2, so we're going to get plus 2. There we go. That's our equation there. So this one here is really honestly like exceeding level. I mean, this is very tough, but hopefully this helps you to understand how to go about solving these.